Okay, welcome to the September 21st, 2023 meeting of the Design Commission. Our meetings are designed to meet updates to the Open Public Meetings Act. Our meetings are being recorded through WebEx to be posted later to our website. Our agenda today is from 9 to 11. We'll get a briefing by Seattle Parks and Rec on the Freeway Park project. Freeway Park has been subject to several commission reviews due to its funding as part of the Seattle Convention Center expansion. It was a public benefit for the vacations, the street vacations there. Today will be a briefing only on how designs are being advanced relative to project funding and its designation as a City of Seattle landmark. Phoebe will be leading the discussion. Then from 11 to noon, we're going to be covering commission business, and we'll be talking about work that we're doing to advance our work plan. So as far as the format goes for the presentation, the team will first provide a presentation. Then any agencies here, and it looks like we do have Sarah from Landmarks, but any public agencies, if you could raise your hand toward the end of the presentation so that I can call on you, we'll take comment from you. And then any members of the public who are here who would like to comment, please use the raise hand function toward the end of the presentation. We'll call for comment. And then after that, the commissioners will ask clarifying questions and make comments. This is just a briefing. We're not taking an action. We're not taking a vote. So you can roll your comments and questions together. And so we'll start with introductions. First, let's go for commissioners in the room, please. First.
Pooja Shah, the engineer commissioner. Phoebe Bogert, landscape architect commissioner.
Jill Crary, at-large commissioner.
And then online, how about Elizabeth?
Elizabeth Connor, artist commissioner. Good morning.
Adam?
Morning, Adam Amrine, urban planning commissioner. I'll also just say, sorry I'm not there in person. I had a kerfuffle with a car and my bike kind of exploded this morning. So I'm fine, but my bike is not. But I did not make it. So.
Sorry.
And then Matt?
Hi, Matt Alves, architect commissioner.
Okay, I think that covers the commissioners. Then staff, Juliet?
Juliet Acevedo, staff.
And Wendy?
Wendy Bandeker, staff commission.
And I'm Valerie Keenest, staff to the commission. Just a reminder that everybody should mute when they're just mute in the room, and mute when you're not speaking, when you're a presenter or a commissioner watching in. So let's kick it off with the presentation. Wendy, do you want to say a few words first?
Yeah, I'm just gonna do no, I think you covered it actually. You just you mentioned pretty clearly that today, because of landmark designation, we won't be taking an action. And so what we have an opportunity to do at this point is to just give some recommendations on some specific things that have been indicated as design commission, open to design commission review. So I think that's really the only thing to keep in mind. I think the presentations speaks for itself.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Reese Harrington. I am with Seattle Parks and Recreation, and I am a senior capital project coordinator for Freeway Park. I took over for Katie Bang and David Graves, so I too am kind of getting up to speed as a lot of the new commissioners are as well. So I can go ahead and share my screen here. So how the agenda will go this morning is just a brief project overview of kind of the big picture items, and then we'll get into more details of the design. Nothing has really drastically changed since the March 2021 presentation to the Design Commission, so I'll go through that pretty quickly, but please ask me questions if you have any. And then I will also go into, actually prior to going to design, I want to talk about the landmarks kind of overview and what they're interested in. So when you are going through and looking at the design, you can have the design intent in mind for you and what the commission will be reviewing. And then we just finished up the WashDOT structural analysis, so we'll be giving an update on that. So the project, Freeway Park is 5.2 acres and we have a $5.4 million construction budget. Let me see. And primarily to repair and restore and enhance the project. It's listed on the National Register of Historic Places and also designated as a Seattle City Landmark in May of 2022. Like I said, we just finished a structural assessment actually Tuesday, or at least the first part of it, and now we are cleared to go into construction documentation. And with a hope to start construction in 2025, which would then finish construction in 2026, which would be just in time for the 50th anniversary. So we're timing this perfectly with all these delays. The original intent of the project was to make the park more welcoming, bring people back to the park, and restore its reputation as a centerpiece of Seattle's park system and an icon of landscape architecture. Through the design process, the design team teased out these key recommendations to strengthen the park entrances, clarify and promote the park's prime areas, and increase activity throughout the park to attract families, park visitors, and provide an infrastructure that would support events and activities. So Freeway Park is kind of a complicated system of properties. And so there's a central spine that is publicly owned, and then the Piggott Corridor, the Convention Center, and this little piece down at the bottom at 6th and Seneca entrance, those are actually privately owned parcels that kind of act as arms out to the community that connect up to Freeway Park. Under the park, there's a series of structures. So areas 1, 2, and 3 are over the WashDOT lid, which is over I-5. Parcel 4 over there is above the Park Place garage, which is under the Park Place building. And 5 is a City of Seattle East Plaza parking garage. And then under the area indicated in 6, that is the Washington State Convention Center. So a lot of different structures that this park is bridging over. Primarily, this central spine is subject to the landmarks designation, and so it's also under the historic review. And this is where the majority of our improvements are taking place in this central spine. And the original project scope stretched from the upper lawns all the way down to the box gardens. That original scope came in at $23 million, slightly over our $5.4 million mark. So we have had to tease that back. And with the help of several advisory groups and meetings, we came up with this phase 1 core of improvements, which really focuses on the upper Seneca Plaza, and the restroom building up in the upper lawns, as well as some signage and wayfinding and lighting that kind of goes throughout that whole spine. So jumping into the landmarks, controls, and incentives. So the Landmarks Board has a certificate of approval that we will need to get for any alternations or significant changes to the built features, major modifications to landscape, hardscape, and the original lighting of the park. Just want to note that landmark designation does not impede the expansion of the park in the future. There's been some concern that any sort of expansion over I-5 in the future would be impeded by landmarks designation, but it does not. We can also get a certificate of approval through administrative review for additions to building features such as ducts, wiring, conduits, exterior light fixtures and security system equipment, removal of trees identified as dead or hazardous, graffiti abatement, and wayfinding signage. We do not need a certificate of approval for repairs, maintenance, pruning of trees, alterations to planting areas that are consistent with a board-approved vegetation management plan. So let me just kind of step back on that one. The design team, as a part of this project, will create a vegetation management plan that will get approved by the Landmarks Board. So after that approval, any sort of improvements or alterations to planting areas must be consistent with that board-approved management plan, but we do not need to go back to get a certificate of approval for that in the future. Removal, replacement of annual plantings, non-original site furnishing changes, or non-original pedestrian light pole changes. And also it's not required to come back for event tents or elements associated with programming events, or the installation or removal of signage, banners, park name signage, and other signage per city code. So all that is kind of distilled into this one table where we've indicated where Parks has approval, Landmarks has approval, WashDOT, and permitting, and then Seattle Design Commission, we would like design input in these kind of new areas, the new signage, new buildings, new seating plinths, stair, handrails, railings, and new site furnishings. I didn't want to stop there and just, is that clear? Are there any questions about kind of the delineation of landmarks in Seattle Design Commission? No?
I think it's clear.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. So going quickly through the core improvements. So we said we're going to preserve the original structures of the park, the concrete walls and plinths, maintain the original circulation and the light poles, and the original trees, lawns, and planting areas. We also are chipping away at that deferred maintenance that I talked about, that $23 million. So we'll be working through that. The enhancement elements that are part of the project, as stated before and as listed here. And we are also modifying some of the original elements, the original paving. We're expanding, which you'll see in a second. Some of the lawns and planting areas will be aligned to respond to these enhancements of the paving. We also are proposing a signage package, and this is again, comes from our design development package that we showed in March of 2021. The signage was influenced by the SDOT Seamless Seattle Pedestrian Wayfinding Program. So we're wanting to be consistent with the signage within Freeway Park, so pedestrians can flow from the core of the city through the park and have consistent wayfinding vocabulary. Lighting will be enhanced in 3 ways. The pedestrian light poles, which were not original but were added later, we will retrofit these with new LED fixtures. There are 2 tall original pole lights or mast lights that the original design intent of Freeway Park was to be downlit and give a moonlight effect through the trees, which has been hindered by the overgrowth of the trees and the canopy, and also by the fact that these lights aren't working anymore. So we're getting up there and repairing those. And then also just accent lighting in the landscape. We're refurbishing the existing benches and adding armrests and grips per best practices for accessible design. And we are adding new benches in discrete areas that are reminiscent of the original bench to add more seating within the plazas. So as I stated, the trees have done very well out there, better than anyone had ever expected. And you can kind of feel that when you're out there. So the design team has developed a canopy management plan where we will be trimming back some of the trees, removing some of the dead or trees that are in poor condition, and also removing some that are planted kind of they're the wrong tree for the wrong place. And also as we change the use of a location, we'll be removing those trees as well. We have a plan to restore some of the vegetation, particularly the trees as shown here. And we're choosing a little bit smaller trees that will maintain their scale in relationship to the park. Again, doing some pavement, repavement for ADA and design repairs. So now looking at specifically at these places within the park, starting at Seneca Plaza. We are increasing the plaza and adding 2 new buildings, a concierge restroom building and a storage building. Adding new seating around the edges of this extended plaza. Improving circulation down through the canyon so you don't have to walk all the way around. You can cut right through to the new larger plaza. And also elevating a depressed vegetation or planting bed, which tends to be a little bit of a security issue. We're increasing the height of that vegetation plane and creating a new raised lawn and viewing area. None of that has really changed since the March 2021 presentation. And here you can see those new buildings in the back. This is that Seneca and 6th entrance. That's the Park Place building right there. And so this work straddles the public property and the private property, but we're making improvements on both to be consistent with the intent of the entrance of the park. So extending the plaza, increasing or changing the pavement to have the right grades for ADA accessibility, new lighting, new signage, new seating, bike racks, and site furnishings. Now this one, take note of this Upper Seneca entrance. Take note that it's very hard to see, first of all, so it's a very small entrance, and also these large trees on the corner that really, they anchor the park, but I'll discuss these in regards to our WashDOT structural analysis, so just kind of remember this image in a few slides. So here we are enlarging this entrance, creating an access area for maintenance vehicles. Currently, they kind of just drive over the landscape bed over there. So we're increasing the size of that, enlarging the plaza, wayfinding, lighting, and site furnishings. Previously in the design development presentation, we had also work in the right-of-way. We are not doing that work now. So outside of that main core, as I stated earlier, wayfinding, lighting, new lights under the overpass at the crew quarters at the 8th Avenue underpass. And improvements to the restroom building, adding a concierge space. And since March 2021, we've been discussing with the convention center, there's this elevator, and this is the only access from the parking garage up to the park, the only ADA access to the park. So it is currently shut down. So we are trying to coordinate with them to improve security and to open that up. So as of Tuesday, we just finished up this WashDOT structural analysis and review. It took a little over a year to get that completed. Through that discussion, we were working with WashDOT to understand how we were going to calculate the real loads and and what the threshold would be for this bridge element. So we potholed and tested 42 locations throughout the site to get the existing soil density, finding that there's about 3 feet of sand under the condition right now, under the soil. We estimated the existing tree weights and also calculated the proposed major modifications in our improvement plan. These hatched areas are the locations that we did that structural analysis. And what we found was a significant number of these locations were actually exceeding the real load weights that were the threshold for the bridge. So our design team went back to the drawing board and tried to figure out how do we lessen the load on this. Not only our modifications were a little too heavy, but also the existing conditions were heavy due to thicker soil, bigger trees, trees planted in locations that they shouldn't have been planted, additional trees planted over the years that didn't take into account the structural loading. So the design team has proposed 4 load reduction strategies. First, we are going in all the areas where we are making modifications, taking out all of the sand and replacing that with structural foam under all of the pavement and lawn areas that we are modifying. Second, we are removing soil and sand around the tree roots through air spading and washing out, and backfilling with this lightweight foamed glass aggregate. It's actually a new product, and as far as we understand, it hasn't been used here in Seattle, but it's being used elsewhere on the West Coast with really great results. So we're excited to kind of test that out and be able to retain these trees. Otherwise, we would have had to just remove these trees and replant something else. So we're excited about that. Tree pruning where we can to reduce weight. At some locations, the trees are just too big, and so we will have to take a few trees down to the root ball and plant an augment plant around them. And in some cases, the tree above grade and also below the soil level is just too big. So we're having to dig out around those trees, remove the root ball. These are the additional trees that we are having to remove. And so the top of that plan is Hubble, and along the right side is Seneca Street. So that photo that was taken with all the large big leaf maple or red maple there at the corner, that entrance, that's where the majority of these trees are being removed. These girders at this corner really have a very low load rating. And so we are having to remove a lot of those trees there. And you can see up in the very top upper right, the design team is looking at replanting with smaller trees that still frame the entrance and give a presence at that corner while staying within the load threshold. So the next steps for us on this project is WashDOT has accepted our calculation and our strategies, so they have allowed us to go forward into construction documentation. They also are saying that the old lease, WashDOT is going through all these joint properties and renewing leases. And so this lease that was kind of sort of created back in the 70s it needs to be redone. So we're working through that, which is not a quick process. So we are going to be diligently going through that process for probably the next year and a half. But more recently, we will be flood testing during the fall to evaluate the drainage and then begin construction documentation really probably next month. So Any questions?
If you're done, we'll.
We are done, sorry. Are
Okay.
you gonna discuss?
I just wanted to ask, have you got other members of your team online?
I do, Calder from the design team is on, and David Graves, who's had a little bit more experience, is
Hey,
here.
David. Yes, here's well, okay. So we have them as resources, we can ask questions.
Absolutely, please do.
And then it looks like
Sarah.
and Reese.
Is Sarah on too?
Sarah's
Yeah,
here.
Sarah's-
Okay, perfect.
And Reese is here.
Okay. We do.
So let's first call for agency and public comment. Sarah, real quick. Sarah, did you want to say anything?
Valerie, are you wondering if I want to speak? This is Sarah.
Yes. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. The only thing I'll say is that Reese did a really great job of going over what requires landmarks board review, what can be reviewed by staff, and what doesn't need any review at all. And they have not yet briefed the Landmarks Preservation Board on their proposal, but I don't really see anything in here that causes any red flags to go up for me. So I think they're taking a sensitive approach, and I think it'll be a pretty smooth process for the Landmarks Board.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands raised. Okay, so let's go into.
Let's let Phoebe kick it.
Okay.
Well, thank you for the presentation. It's, an honor to, review and look at Freeway Park. It's such a special, important part of the city. We do understand that we do not, as the Design Commission, you just went through the process. We are not issuing any approval, so we're just here to look at design intent for new elements. Is the way we understand it. I think that graph was really helpful. And so I think today we'll just go through the room and then online first with Commissioner question and comments, if there are any questions, and then it can be rolled into questions and comments since we're not taking action. So we can start with Pooja.
I don't have any questions.
Do you have any comments?
I was looking at the ADA and drainage issues map. And yeah, there were just the ponding and overflow drainage failures. Curious about that, but.
Yeah, we were, that's kind of the flood testing is this next step is it the infrastructure, is it the pipes and the drainage? How much of it is the underground utilities versus the, just the grading site? So we're working through that now and we'll kind of fine tune that during construction documentation.
Right, okay. No, this is great. It's a super fun project.
It is super fun. I have a couple questions. The $725,000 that went for programming, is that already gone to the foundation? Is that programming all underway?
Yes, I don't think Reese is on, but yes, that was,
I think Reese was on.
and correct me if I'm wrong, David.
Yeah, that's right.
With the, it went directly to the Parks Foundation, but we've been administering it, so they bill out. Last I saw, maybe there was 150,000 left in our coffers to give to her, but in conversations with her, she's already spent that. She just needs to bill it to us.
And then what happens after that runs out?
Then she's actively fundraising, but I think that's more of that wasn't a reoccurring funding source.
But there's some kind of attempt to keep that level of, I mean, I think people are what is really ultimately the answer at Freeway Park, right? It's a fabulous place, it's an amazing legacy, and it needs the life of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just scrolling through their website, and they seem to have done an amazing job in recent years And I wondered what was around to guarantee that going forward. What kind of guarantees were in place about that?
Yeah, I mean, that was a one-time, I mean, it was paid out to the Freeway Park Association over a series of years. I remember it came out of the public benefit package from the convention center expansion, so it was $925 million for the improvements, and then $750K for activation, so we parsed that out. Yeah, I think the intention was to help Freeway Park with their fundraising and activation. So the assumption is that they'll be now self-sustaining, and we do support them through our downtown activation as well.
Right, and I saw that there's some art money too.
Yep.
Stuff.
Yeah.
And then the new structures. So if I got this correctly, before you had the landmarking completed, you've gone through design development with the design commission?
Correct.
And so do you have some images of these new structures? And can we talk about them a little bit?
We can, and Calder, I don't know if you have any more updated ones, but what I have is kind of this perspective view. So do you see it here? This is the concierge would be at the office or area would be at the tip of this building. Restrooms behind, and then storage here for any sort of furnishing, site furnishings.
So I'm wondering, the philosophy behind this design intent approach, whatever, is to have them be of the same style and family as the park, or if you're following one of Landmark strategies, which is to have new stuff be obviously new, not trying to blend in. So I'm just wondering what's going on with the design intent for those things.
Yeah, Calder, would you be able to speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes. Okay. Definitely they will look new and different from the rest of the park. That said, we've done a fair amount of work in schematic and design development to size them and kind of develop proportions that feel appropriate for the park. And so the intent is for them to be off to the side, small, and feel like they belong there, but also clearly to be new. It's not clear in this image, but due to weight considerations, they will not be concrete or anything like that that looks original. The original restroom building that's up in the upper lawns is concrete, and it's a box, and these will not be concrete and they will not be boxes. So we are continuing to work on the design here and we'll be presenting that to Landmarks and the ARC here in the next few months. As of now, the design hasn't been developed from what we presented to you guys or this group back in 21, and we will have updated designs, I think, next time we come to you.
Great, you answered I was thinking concrete or no concrete.
Yeah.
That seemed like sort of the fundamental materials question. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Concrete wasn't an option because it would be too heavy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to carve them out of foam, so it'll be somewhere in between.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, we can move to online. Elizabeth?
Thank you. It's nice to see this again. I may be the only person who's seen this before now, besides staff. So it's really, and I congratulate you on navigating some of the landmarks questions. One of the things that you mentioned, Reese, you mentioned advisory groups. And I'm wondering who they are at this point and how long they're going to follow this project forward.
We have the Freeway Park Advisory Group, and they will be following this project all the way through construction. And of course, the landmarks, and we also have DAP, so the state landmarks group.
some of the assumptions of how this is going to work, I think, do center around programming. And you've mentioned some potential public-private partnerships. You mentioned the convention center, possibly for access questions. Can you talk a little more about what those are? How long, what the or the one? I'm not sure how many there are. How long those will be maintained? Because it seems as though they're programming and access are something that are really important here.
Yeah, Risa Conklin, I don't think she's on, but she would probably be better to speak to this, but she is heading up the programming, and we're working closely with her to have this design support her programming needs. So for example, site furnishings, we've been working closely with her, accent lighting, the elevator issue, egress through the site for the patrons, right, that come to these events that she has. That she has a pretty robust schedule of events. However, I think people just don't know and they don't see it because of just the condition of the park. It's really hard to see it from the street. So she's putting all this effort in, and once the improvements are done, I think it will really open up the feeling of that and will be much more inviting to people.
Can I add something to that? You may recall that, and it's not really depicted in the presentation, but a lot of the improvements that we're making are to help to make it easier to program the park, both in terms of access, access to power. One of the two new buildings is a storage building that will have space for convenient space for Freeway Park Association and parks to keep stuff that helps them program on a more regular basis. So a lot of this is to make it more practical and convenient to encourage that activation so that the resources that are required to activate the park are not as high as they are now. Right now, they have to carry things all across the park from underneath 8th Avenue, for instance. And they have to jerry-rig their power to put their holiday lights up in the winter. And so we're trying to encourage that and make it easier through this project.
Thanks, that's really helpful. And I do remember that from the previous presentation. So I think that the more the better of all of that you just mentioned, Calder. One of the things I walk up Seneca a lot and down, and so I really feel enthusiastic about you lightening up that corner and that side of the park. I think it's really important. So I guess I'm going into comments a little bit, which I understand we're doing both questions and comments. I know there are concerns about tree canopy in Seattle. I support that. I also, as someone who's worked in a variety of different public spaces, don't think trees necessarily need to be sacred. So I appreciate your multiplicity of approaches towards what trees are where and how this contributes to lightening up the space and opening up the space, because it really has gotten a bit lugubrious in weight over time. So I do appreciate that. I also remember from the earlier presentation that there was quite a bit of commission concern about similar characteristics of the new structures. So I just want to put that out there again. I realize we're not discussing those right now, but when Jill asked about the materiality of those structures, I recall a lot of interest to which way those buildings are facing, how people would access them, and also is this part of programming? Are these structures part of programming? So there's a question that I'm asking right now as a follow-up. Is the use of those structures being considered part of programming going forward? besides storage, but more
Yeah.
in terms of welcoming.
Yeah, and I wasn't a part of that early design, but my understanding, Calder, is the orientation of the buildings, the location of the concierge booth was kind of moved so it would have better vision throughout the plaza and easier access to the restrooms. And then we put them in kind of an L shape, which I think was in that design development stage, but I think the orientation and the programming within those buildings changed a little bit per the comments from the design commission. And they will be associated with the programming. So they are anticipating staffing, Freeway Park Association was anticipating staffing that with concierge to keep eyes on the site and also just to help with people wayfinding throughout the park.
Thank you.
Was there anything else, Calder? Did I miss anything in that?
No, we've had with this group really good conversations about the location and orientation and design of the concierge building. So just for those of you who are new, that it's 2 gender neutral bathrooms, a single stall, and a concierge. It's like a little office space that has windows on 3 sides, actually. Right where a stair coming down from above, a stair coming up from the street, and the corner of the plaza, which happens to be the kind of darker and less used part of the plaza today, right where those things come together. So, Reese, if you can put your hand on the north, yeah, right there, that's windows all around. So it's good eyes on the park, and it's a permanent and comfortable place for a park concierge to be year-round, out of the elements, which is a huge improvement to what is out there today, which is basically a desk that can roll around. So that was a key part of the programming and activation of this heart of the park.
Yeah, thanks for the update on that.
Yeah.
I'll just finish with one extra comment. I do think lightness, keeping lightness in mind, which is somewhat counterintuitive with a large concrete structure that goes over a freeway. I think if that can continue to inform decisions going forward, that does bring up a question when you say the central spine is part of what you need to respect as part of the both landmarks decision. Is there anything in the way that you as design team feel is in the way of being able to achieve that kind of lightness and openness currently?
No.
Great.
I don't think so. The only tricky part I think that we'll be working through with landmarks is that building, both of those buildings are on the footprint of existing planters. So those are elevated planters, with walls. And so in order to put those buildings where they're shown, we would have to modify or remove parts of those original parts of the park. And that's because it's really the best space. And it's also a weight offset by removing those concrete walls and all the dirt where that or soil where the plants are, we can put a building there. And so that's just going to be something that we need to explain and get approval for.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Sure. And I hope that goes forward smoothly for you. You also mentioned some spaces below. Is there any relationship of those spaces below to this project?
Are you? Can you say that again? I don't understand your question.
Reese mentioned in the presentation this morning that there are all these other spaces below this structure that you're working on. Was that for information purposes, or is there any relationship to this project?
There's a lot of relationship to the project, just the complexity of construction. And that's something that we're navigating. So the construction of this improvement will be really complex because of weight limits. We're not going to be able to have heavy equipment. over certain structures, and also we're doing improvements over private property. And so being very cognizant of those improvements on over structures. So we don't want to damage waterproofing. You know, there's lots of things that we could stir up that we do not want to. So I think that's really but there's not really any programming per se that would take place in those structures. But I do think it's important for us to, for parks to try to work with the convention center to get ADA accessibility. Because right now, if you park in the garage for one of these programmed events, you have to literally walk through a maze of parking lots to get to an elevator or the escalators in the convention center, and then come up and then navigate back to, you know, the main event spaces. Mostly because of security issues with that one elevator. So we're going to be working with them to try to get in a partnership with them to open that elevator, and it helps them, it helps us, and it's goodwill. So we're going to be working with them to do that.
Thanks. And I appreciate these partnerships going forward as well, especially where there may be some some publicly accessible spaces underneath this as well. I'm going to pass this on to Adam with thanks.
Awesome. Well, thanks team for the presentation. This is really super exciting to see moving forward, and really appreciate the work. I had a couple of questions. And you know, maybe some of your ADA work covers this, some of the ADA accessibility work that you were mentioning, but could you say more if you've thought about how to accommodate, you know, additional modes through the park? I know it's not primarily a through space, but has there been any like, you know, design features for, you know, thinking about how bikes or, you know, other wheelie things kind of move through or kind of come to the park?
Calder, are you able to?
Yeah. One thing that comes to mind, and we started this project like 4 or 5 years ago, so I'm drawing on my memory here, but there was a study. We looked at what it would take to provide an ADA accessible walking connection from the bottom part of the park in Seneca Plaza up, I think it's 14 or 16 feet to Upper Seneca, in addition to what's out there on the sidewalk on Seneca, which is not, you know, under a 8% slope. And basically it was a really long ramp that would completely wipe out the canyon feature, which is absolutely, you know, the kind of the icon for the park. And so with the city's ADA coordinator, we decided not to advance that design any farther. So I think because of the slope that those two park spaces sit on, it is really challenging, if not impossible, to provide that type of connection. We did look at that. We were interested in it, and ruled it out kind of early in schematic design. We are adding bike parking. We are not changing circulation routes through the park. We are modifying the edges, I would say, of paving areas to make them less finicky, I would say. It's my word to navigate. You know, there's this kind of toothed edge that goes around almost all the paved spaces in the park. And that, in addition to being, I think, inconvenient for folks who use canes to get around, is also a problem for parks maintenance vehicles who need to drive across the grass basically to get from one place to another. So we're easing some of that, you know, judiciously in parts of the park. But in terms of changing access or bike or wheels circulation through the park, no, we're not changing that through this project. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was super helpful. Thank you.
Cool, thanks.
I think that all makes sense. It's kind of a similar question, but what about, have you considered at all, you know, loading or buses or how kind of groups might access the park in the future? I know there's that one, I think it's along Seneca, kind of pull out, but how are you thinking about managing that space? The curb space, I guess is what the question is about.
There's a pull out in front of the At the 6th and Seneca entrance. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, the question is if you've considered how, as you've added and refined program areas and, added other facilities, it seems like there may be additional people accessing the park from a loading or kind of a bus and, load unload perspective. And so the question is if you're accommodating or thinking about those things.
I think we're not making any changes. And in fact, between DD and now, we have eliminated right-of-way work. So work between the property line and the curb. We did show some ideas in DD. I don't think they were addressing specifically what you're talking about, but at any rate, those have been eliminated from the scope of this project.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, well, I have two more questions. One is about, it totally makes sense, I think, the strategy with, the tree removal and kind of restoring some of the historic character as well as the loading. I was curious if you all have considered what you may do with the wood. I don't know if it's suitable to use in, the furnishings in the park or, some materials for, this park or another public project, but have you all thought through the kind of life cycle of some of those materials that you're removing?
Not in detail, and I'm really excited to do so. I think now that we understand the scope of tree removal better, and also the city's new policy to preserve trees, and I think we've got some work to do here in cities to figure out, well, all kinds of things related to tree protection and removal, including I think we should have a recommendation for where that wood goes.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's exciting, I think.
Yeah, super cool. Oh, last question is, again, it makes sense from your budgetary constraints how you land on the project, and I think it's really good that you're focusing on maintenance and restoration. I was curious if you all will be making recommendations for phasing to get to some of those kind of full scope items, or how, future maintenance, is that part of this project, thinking through kind of future interventions with this park?
Yeah, the good thing is that we did have that really large comprehensive study and schematic design and design development. And we have a whole price list and itemized list of improvements that need to be done. So yeah, but for sure this is just the tip of the iceberg. And as we're just trying to get through this one first, and then we will start to kind of look through the other phases of the project and see what happens as this one comes on board, how the activation happens. But the upper lawn definitely needs some improvements. And just during construction, we can start looking at what can facilities do to help us so we can double down on this construction effort. So I think we're going to be sprucing up the whole park at the same time and really putting a lot of effort with our gardening and facilities as much as we can, even though they're pretty overburdened with the other 497 parks, but we often do all hands on deck when we do these big capital projects.
Great, thank you. That's it for me.
And Adam, did you have any additional comments? It seems like you had to pass the questions, or is that it?
Yeah, I think my comments were embedded with my questions.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, perfect.
I appreciate some of the direction. Thank you.
There's Matt online.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Getting an AIA.
Oh, nice.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, okay. So I think I'm the last one then. So I don't believe I have any additional questions or comments. I think, the group here has asked everything relevant, and it's, it really truly is an important and exciting project for the city and, for the history of landscape architecture. And so I think we all really appreciate the incisive design intent that you're taking, that's really understanding what the park is, what needs to be done, and that the people are the future of the park. So kudos and appreciation for that. I just kind of went through and, well, before I summarize, so I just have a little summary of what I think were kind of the key points that everybody made. Is there any kind of final, since we do have time, is there any final things, or should we just move on from any of the commissioners? No? Okay. It's a small group today.
Well, and ultimately, it's really not in our purview. So,
Yeah, exactly.
I think the best we can do is kind of offer our positive suggestions.
Yeah, exactly.
Wish them well.
Yep. So I thought I would just summarize the wishing well part.
Double down on that. That would be great. We need all of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tough one. I mean, hearing the $23 million, down to $5 million is, that's quite a bit of work to encapsulate. So because our purview is simply just design input, I know the things that I summarized are, I thought Jill said it well, people are the answer for the park, for Freeway Park, truly. I mean, I think that is what we, why we're back looking at Freeway Park, is that it needs the injection of life and people. So, we applaud the intent of all the improvements leading to support program and getting people back into the park. That includes the structures, that includes the site furnishings, that includes lighting and how you're treating the entrances. So it really feels that the important element of Seneca Plaza as, being first and foremost where you're spending energy is appropriate and good. Talking about tree canopy, Elizabeth, I think that's a very important part is that, Freeway Park, the trees did way better than anybody ever thought. That's what, has been said time and time again. It is crazy that they have done so well. So trees are so important to our city and to sequestering carbon and, keeping that coverage, and the city has doubled down on how we protect and preserve trees. However, it really does inform how people use the park. So I think your multifaceted approach to looking at weight, looking at access and visibility, and tree health in order to find ways to open up the park is commendable. And we do look forward to, I think, Adam's point of reusing wood is a really exciting one. Also, there is that historical already use of wood in the park, so whether it's on site or off site, but I think that's is really a nice give back. And then finally, I think I already said this, but entrances and access, that is the key, is getting people in the park. So that's the programming piece, and making sure, I think, as you do the documentation for the entrances, you look at that north entry on Seneca, and it is hidden. So that kind of test back all the time that each of those two entrances that you are improving are facilitating access and usability, and facilitating movement is key, just getting people in the park. And I think that's it. We appreciate the update.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Elizabeth has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, in the related to the people are the solution. I think keeping, this is more for parks, to have some kind of stewardships going forward, some that are being the partnerships that exist now, and figuring out how that can continue, so it's not just on parks to keep activities going and keep use really rich. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so commissioners, will move over into business now.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.